order, and so you're making your point is a that's how I read this, right? It's you don't give the punchline and then kind of come back to it and then explain unless you're doing so with great intention, like a Christopher Nolan movie. But what I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think what they do is they create a cogent and clear kind of path to make a point. I think. Argue, by the way, feel free to anyone who wants to disagree with me. Um,
Well, sometimes linear speech has a lot of irrelevance first. If you start with point A and start telling what the weather was like, and I was driving my brother's car, and eventually there's a point down there.
right.
But that's another difficulty.
That's right. So I guess
But
speaks of the first
speak to the
point first, meaning
point.
gets right to it
Right,
instead of
exactly.
kind of misgiving the
Exactly.
extraneous stuff ahead of
That,
it.
that brought up a question for me, which is the first point first a chronological point, or is it the most important point, then the second most important point, the third most important point?
I think it's chronological, and the only reason why I say that is because the Hebrew says, "Ve'omer al Rishon Rishon." Speaks about the first, and then speaks about second, last. But it's a good question, but I think it's chronological, but
Okay.
I could be wrong. And concerning that which he has not heard, this is a beautiful one. I really approve of this. And concerning that which he has not heard, he says, I've not heard. Right? It's like, that's a great one, right? How many people do you know who just can't say, you know what, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
I try my hardest. I try my hardest in this environment, in Torah study. I try my hardest to say, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, it sounds right, but I don't want to speak to that. I don't know. Like I try because I think that's because the person who doesn't do that, not only are they potentially guiding down the wrong path, but more importantly, it's just the opposite of humility. Of like, you can't handle not knowing everything. You have to have an answer for everything. Why can't you just say I don't know? Why can't you be humble? Why can't you allow someone else possibly to know something that you don't know? I think that one I really feel very, very good about.
And Rabbi,
that-
you're also deliberately misleading the person you're speaking to.
Yeah. You're deliberately misleading. You're taking them entirely down the wrong, incorrect
That's right.
path. Because if you really are speaking without not knowing, how early should I get to the airport for my international flight? Oh, an hour is fine. I don't know. An hour is fine. The person gets there an hour early, and then they miss their flight. Like, you could be really screwing them up. And so I think that there's some great wisdom in just being humble. I'm not sure. Even if it's I'm not exactly sure. Here's what I suspect. Then you're showing some humility. Like, if you're forcing me to give an answer, fine. Here's my answer, but I don't know really.
We say in our house, when someone kind of forces you to give an answer, it's like, well, I speak without knowing, but here you go,
Right. It's that's what saying it that way is saying, I don't know. I do not know. I mean, they say I haven't heard, because what they're really saying is I never learned that lesson. But what is it okay for me to eat, rice on Passover? I don't know. I never listened to that lesson. Had I been at that lesson, I could tell you. But so saying I haven't heard is saying I don't know.
But the problem you have, and people in your position, is that people expect you to know.
Know everything. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. No, yeah, for sure.
That must be
But that's a
difficult
powerful
tightrope
example
to
of
walk.
humility then.
Yeah.
The person I expect to know everything says, you know what? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Let me look it up.
Yeah.
Let me look it up.
And I like that you say, this is what I think, it's not what is necessarily true.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I say that in Torah study all the time.
Yeah.
But that's more of that's not humble. What I'm saying by that is, like, because I'm saying I believe this to be true. I'm merely saying that I just don't want you to think that this is 100% true, because certainly no one knows, but this is my strong opinion about this, right? But so I'm trying to not be, to say I don't deserve credit for that one. I deserve credit when people say, how many times is this said in the, I'm like, I don't know, right? Or has there ever been a time like this before? No, I don't know. The last one is a great one too. And he acknowledges the truth, right? What does that mean?
Tell the truth.
Yes, but no.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
not
it
how I
means
read it.
if someone corrects you and says, no, it's this, it's that, you say, oh, yeah, you're right. It's
Correct.
admitting that you could be
Right.
wrong.
That's right.
You can be influenced by another person, right? You can be, you have the capacity to have a belief and then be convinced by someone else that maybe the other belief was more correct than yours. So, and obviously this can be, a lot of these things are referring to Torah and law but how many days should Passover be? 8. Well, another person says, Torah says it's 7. You're right. The Torah says it's 7. I'm wrong. You are correct. I'm acknowledging the truth, which is what you just said to me. I can be influenced by a person who speaks to me in ways which are worthy. All of these, and then it ends, and the reverse of these is a clod, right? The person who does interrupt, the person who speaks before another person, the person who doesn't acknowledge the truth, the person who doesn't have linear arguments. So those are the clod person. Right. Now, ultimately what it's saying is, it's kind of, and all of this is leading to about, the wise person kind of functions with a degree, a modicum of humility, and the uncultured does not. It's full of themselves.
I read in one of the books, maybe one that you assigned, that Marcus Aurelius was influenced deeply by some rabbi, particular rabbi.
What was influenced?
Marcus Aurelius.
Okay, yeah.
And what you're saying here could be right out of the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
No, Marcus Aurelius was influenced by rabbis. It was the same time period, and they talk about how he was such a wise he was like that extraordinary emperor of Rome who committed to knowledge and committed to, they talk about, the Talmud talks about how the give and take between those two, and Josephus does also, for sure. So Pirkei Avot 5:8. We're still working on 7s. At least we're not on 10 anymore. 7 kinds of punishment come to the world for 7 categories of transgression. When some of them give tithes and others do not give tithes, a famine from drought comes. Some go hungry and others are satisfied when they have and some go hungry and others are satisfied. That's kind of like thought 1. So in this whole concept of 7 kinds of punishment for 7 transgressions, so the first one has to do with tithing, and when some people give tithes and others do not give tithes, tithe being 10% of your yield, a famine from drought occurs in which some go hungry and others are satisfied. Meaning, when it happens that some of the community gives tithes and others don't, it creates food insecurity, but not an absence of food. Now, when they have all decided not to give tithes, a famine from tumult and drought comes. In other words, a total famine and drought comes. When they have, in addition, decided not to set apart the dough offering, an all-consuming famine comes. Again, same thing. Pestilence comes to the world for sins punishable by death, according to the Torah, but which have not been referred to the court and for neglect of the law regarding the fruits of the sabbatical year. So now they're saying it's not famine, but pestilence, meaning, overridden by insects. Pestilence comes to the world for sins punishable to death according to the Torah, but which would not have been referred to the court. In other words, if you have a sin which is punishable by death according to the Torah, but which is not punishable by death according to just the regular secular courts, then just pestilence comes, right? So in other words, a kid who is the wayward and defiant kid that is supposed to be stoned to death. So that's punishable by death by Jewish law, but not punishable by death according to secular law.
Mhm.
And so they can't kill a person for that. So they say that what's going to happen is you're going to get pestilence instead. That's like because all of these things, all of these sins are God's going to punish you. And so this is the way God punishes you.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
So it says a wayward child is
That
subject
was an example I gave. The Torah talks about the wayward and defiant kid, the kid who was misbehaving. The
subject
Torah
to death. You're going to put him to death?
Yes, put him to death. According to the Torah says it.
Yeah, I understand. But that seems to see. Back in the
Which,
day,
by the
they
way-
must have a lot of trouble with wayward kids.
Yeah, which is so strikingly hilarious to me. Because
Yeah.
why is it so strikingly hilarious to me? Okay, I will tell you. Because you got some people in this world, I won't say whom, who insist that the word of God is the word, right? Why should gay marriage be outlawed? Because it says so in the Bible, right? Why should, why do we, whatever the rules are, why shouldn't you drink? Why shouldn't you, all these things? Because it says so in the good book, right? But they cherry pick which things are important to them and which aren't. These same people who are complaining about gay marriage. Again, I'm not trying to be. I'm just saying, like, the same people who are complaining about gay marriage, but they're perfectly fine with a wayward and defiant son not getting stoned. I, of course, think that kid should not get stoned, and we shouldn't have a problem. But you can't cross-dress because it says a man who wears women's clothes is abhorrent to God. Like, okay, fine. I'm not denying it says that, but why is it that you're choosing to dwell on that one and not this one? So yes, it does say that about a kid.
Well, and on the matter of punishable by death, if those punishments were carried out, there'd be no people.
I wouldn't have made it out of kindergarten.
That's
I'm
right.
curious whether they were ever actually executed or how often that took place.
I can tell you that there was at least that I think it was the Talmud dealing with that came up with a virtually impossible way to follow that. The Talmud kind of says, well, that kid first has to be given a warning, and then needs to go before 3 people of the community who witnessed it, and then needs to write it. And it's like they make it so impossible that it would never happen. But who knows? Maybe it did happen in the Torah times. I don't know. The sword comes to the world for the delay of judgment and for the perversion of judgment. There's war in this world when you delay judgment on somebody or pervert judgment.
That's pretty well.
Yeah. And because of those who teach the Torah not in accordance with the accepted law. And you know what else, why else the sword comes to the world? War comes when people give bad interpretations that lead to violations of the law, right? Teach the Torah not in accordance with accepted law. And right, and so it's when you're just like running your mouth and you're wrong. You're leading someone down the wrong path, and as a result, war could come as a result of it. Now, what's interesting is that so many of these are now talking about, which I find to be very worthy, that, it talks about collective punishment for the sins that you do by yourself, right? If some people give tithes, but others don't, meaning it could be 99% of the people tithe, but 1% doesn't. And then what does that mean? That there's going to be a famine. It will affect some and not others, but there's still going to be food insecurity. In other words, there's a person, if you just thought about it from like, if you eat a bacon double cheeseburger on Passover, right? You think to yourself, I guess there's a chance I could be struck down by lightning because of this, but I'm willing to take that risk, right? But if I said to you, if you eat that bacon double cheeseburger on Passover, that the community is going to suffer as a result of it, it's a little bit heavier of a punishment, right? It's collective punishment for your deeds, and
a bigger deterrent.
Yeah, and so, and I think,
Oh, I was gonna, sorry, I was gonna say, I think back then too, everyone had to cooperate or you couldn't survive. And I
yeah,
think maybe it's a way of keeping people in line. It makes
Yeah.
me think story, Laura Ingalls Wilder, one of her stories, she wrote Little House on the Prairie. One of the earlier stories, there's a boy, they have a son who gets in trouble and so they can't do the threshing because they're constantly going after this kid and they may not get the wheat in. And it makes me think of that, because even if you just have one person who's not doing what they're supposed to do, that you're chasing after, when there's so few people and everyone has to pitch in, it makes a bigger difference than we see now.
I agree. I
think it was a way of, back in the day, it was not about often, but certainly used to keep a community in line. Community meaning a group of people. It's unless somebody comes forward and
Yes.
gives me the right answer, we're going to put every third person to death or something.
Right. I mean, and by the way, that is also, my opinion about the concept of afterlife, like, why is it that played such a huge role in so many religions? I believe there are two reasons, or maybe more, but the biggest reason is to police people. They were self-policing themselves, because if you thought you could go to hell for what you did, you might think twice about doing it. Now, I believe there are other reasons. I believe that, especially in the Jewish world, we thought to ourselves that we're suffering today, but the next world will be the foil to our suffering now. But so there, you can see it from the perspective of suffering and of and reward in the future, but also, it has a lot to do with police making sure that you kind of live by some sort of common ethic and standard. And, so this is kind of our way of communicating that same thing, which is we have an ethic and a standard, and we all need to buy into this. And we're a community here. So I agree, Mark and
Now, I've
Jared.
had the impression most of my life that Judaism didn't really believe in an afterlife. And I'm wondering if that's a prejudice.
It's kind of yes and kind of no.
Okay.
We do believe in an afterlife. However, we don't make such a big deal out of it. But our texts do.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Our texts do. But like, you'll never hear me ever, not one. You haven't. No one here in this room. No one in any previous synagogue I've ever been in has ever heard me say anything about the afterlife, except a few times in a class setting, not in any type of like a ritual setting. I will not talk about it. It is an absurdity for me to think about it like that. What I might say, and I have said, is, do I believe in life after death? Maybe, because maybe, not yes, maybe, because when I hear about an infant who dies at 5 minutes old, it pains me to think that that's it. And I want to believe something more than that, and so I insist on thinking that, like, I might go there, but what I won't do is talk about heaven and hell, and even our tradition doesn't feel so comfortable talking about it. It does. It rarely talks about like whatever hell is. You don't even really ever hear it. It just kind of talks about various different qualities of the afterworld. Like if you do X, Y, and Z, your experience in the Olam Haba in the next world will be one of joy. You'll be studying Torah with the great rabbis. You'll be, X, Y, and Z. That's our vision of the afterlife. But as I've said to you before, like, or said, I think before, things like, what does it mean when on the high holidays when we say you'll be judged by God in the book of life? I mean, what are you being judged for? It's for the afterlife, right? So it's like, but we don't really talk about it. Even in Orthodox settings, you don't really hear it much. Like, you could go to an Orthodox synagogue for a year straight and never once hear the rabbi talking about, Cal, you going to put the computer back in my office?
It's there now.
Oh, thank you very much.
And plugged in.
Okay, thanks. You'll never once hear the rabbi kind of talking about the afterlife or anything like that. This is not part of what we do. We just don't talk about it. So yes, it's there, but we do focus way more on what you do here than what happens
Yeah,
afterwards.
virtue is its own reward.
Yeah.
I'd like to say one thing. I love my answer to that question because it does come up frequently in social settings. Say, well, if there's an afterlife, I'll be sure to send you a postcard when I get there.
That's right. But there's no mail. But all right, fine.
Well,
All right.
the frustration when you have conversations like that is with the people who are so
Insistent on it.
certain.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are certain
Yeah.
that this is the way it is, and there's not a shred of actual
Right.
proof or evidence.
Well,
Like,
find it-
we can
Even for me
speculate.
saying, even when I was describing what I consider to be the most compelling thing for me about the afterlife, which is the 5-minute-old baby who dies,
Yeah.
right? But still, I say, I need to believe in an afterlife. I'm dying to believe in an afterlife because it pains me to think that that's it. But that's not me saying there is. That's me saying, I gotta hope there is at the deepest core of my being,
Yeah.
because otherwise it feels so empty,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that. But that's not me saying there is. That's me saying I'm begging for there to be. So I'm hoping.
I mean, I sort of have a bifurcated one. Personally, I don't really believe in one because I figure I'll put off what I'm supposed to do in this life, But
But it's not
But when I thought
reincarnation
young-
necessarily.
No,
It's,
no,
right.
I'm just saying, but when a young person who's an outstanding individual dies,
Yeah.
and that person had everything in front of him or her, had every reason for a wonderful life that would help a lot of people, then I want to believe in an afterlife.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right, let's look at Pirkei Avot 5:9. Wild beasts come to the world for swearing in vain.
But God made the wild beasts in Genesis.
Right, no, but wild beasts like come into your world.
Come into your world.
Your
Get
world.
attacked by them.
For swearing in vain.
Oh.
That's not taking God's name in vain. That's saying, I swear to God I'll come to the synagogue
Right.
every Friday night if I make it through this, and then you don't do it. But so that's what, if you do that, wild beasts come. And for the profanation of the name. So therefore, also, if you take God's name in vain, meaning if you say God, like, God damn it, God, whatever, that's
I'm in trouble.
wild beasts. No useful purpose. Exile comes to the world for idolatry. Now that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that is.
And the reason why that's an interesting one is because, so when you think about the word exile, what does that mean to you? Yes, but when you think about exile in a Jewish context, or in our historical
You're
context,
cast out of
Cast
what's
out.
that? E,
Coming out of
Passed
Egypt.
out.
Exodus.
Egypt, but really it's about exile after the destruction of the temple, after the temples, right? So we were in exile after the first temple was destroyed. We went to Babylonia, and then it became Persia, and then we were in exile after the second destruction of the second temple, and didn't come back to Israel officially until 1948. According to our tradition, the reason for the exile, the destruction of the second temple and the subsequent exile, the second temple, is that we hate, it was called sinat chinam, unnecessary hatred. People were just hating each other for no good reason, kind of like what it feels now. And that was the reason for the destruction of the second temple. The destruction of the first temple, however, was because of idol worship. According to our tradition, why was God so angry with us that God allowed God's holy temple to be destroyed? Because we worshipped idols. Why was God so angry with us that God would send us into exile after the second? Because we hated each other baselessly. Well, so what they're saying here is another punishment comes from idolatry, and that's exile. And they say, and we got proof for that one. It happened. For idolatry, for sexual sins, and for bloodshed, and for transgressing the commandment for the year of the release of the land. So let's just be clear. You go into exile as a community if there's idol worship, if there's sexual indiscretion, if there's murder, and if you neglected to at the 50th year return the land to its proper owner. No, excuse me, 7th year. Hold on. Yeah, 7th year. And if on the 7th year you don't let the land lay fallow for a year.
But it says exile comes to the world.
Right. One person. Everyone goes into exile because you didn't, like, they're trying to say, don't murder or else we're all going into exile. Don't sexual immorality or else we're all going into exile. Don't idol worship or else we're all going into exile. And finally, make sure that you let your crop, your land stay barren for, uncultivated for a year, which I believe is a worthy thing, for horticulture, but not a good enough reason to send us in exile. Right? At 4 times pestilence increases. In the 4th year, in the 7th year, and at the conclusion of the 7th year, and at the conclusion of the Feast of Tabernacles in every year. So in other words, it's okay, so to explain it. In the 4th year, on account of the tithe of the poor, which is due in the 3rd year. So in other words, if you don't properly tithe in the 3rd year, then the 4th year, we're getting pestilence. In the 7th year, on account of the tithe of the poor, which is due in the 6th year, same thing. At the conclusion of the 7th year, on account of the produce of the 7th year, meaning you didn't let the 7th year lie barren, and at the conclusion of the Feast of Tabernacles in every year for robbing the gifts up to the poor. In other words, it's saying that with the exception of the 7th year, it's like if we need to make sure that we're taking care of the needy and taking care of the poor, and this is how you do it, and if you don't, pestilence is going to come. In other words, you might as well do it, because if you don't do it, it's going to be an infestation of insects, and everyone's going to get screwed. So might as well just do it now.
That must have been a remarkable departure from the practices of the world at that time. Yeah,
Well,
tithing,
yes
taking care of the
and no.
needy.
And the only reason why I say no is because they had been doing it probably for 400 years already, because it was in the Torah to do it.
Oh, no, I'm talking about vis-a-vis other peoples besides.
Yes,
Jewish
but
people.
correct.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I'm
But it's a
wondering-
strong statement about taking care of the poor,
Yeah,
right? And if you don't take care of the poor, everybody suffers.
yeah.
That's the main message. Go ahead.
I was thinking about that, and back to the 5:8, where it's talking about when some give tithes and others don't.
Right. Famine.
Well, I'm thinking that it seems like they would want to be getting at, how do you feel if you give, how does a person who gives feel when he knows others don't?
That's right. I agree. It's saying it's because they're afraid that if it starts to become clear, because they're saying, oh, if no one tithes, this happens. But if some people tithe and some people don't tithe, then it still happens. It's just not as bad. But the thing about it is that, and of course, they don't tell you who's going to be food insecure and who's not, but just some people are going to be food insecure. But I think what they're protecting themselves from is if some people do and some people don't, then the people who do are going to look at the people who don't, and they're going to be like, why are we feel like the fools for doing it while everyone else isn't doing it? And so no one's going to do it. So it leads then to the next one, which is everyone's going to suffer. It's like, we'll start early and just say when some people do and some people don't, it's kind of food insecurity. But then when people notice that some people are doing it and some people aren't doing it, and all those people who are doing it choose not to do it, then everyone for sure is going to suffer in a major way.
Do the poor have to tithe?
No. They don't have anything to tithe.
Right.
Right. Another one. Let's just keep running with this. Again, I was just trying to get through a handful of these. There are 4 types of, so now we go from 7, we went from 10 to 7 and now 4. And we do 4 for a while. 4s are fun ones.
It's like the 4 sons.
Yeah, but yes, but there are 4 types of character in human beings. These, now we're getting to some real good ethical or just values and virtues. The 4 types of character in human beings. One that says mine is mine and yours is yours. This is the commonplace type. And some say this is a Sodom type of character. One that says mine is yours and yours is mine is an unlearned person. An Am Haaretz. That's another term. They said clod first, which was a golem. Now they're using the term Am Haaretz. One says mine is yours and yours is yours. It's a pious person. And one says mine is mine and yours is mine is a wicked person. Now, I think that, okay, the last 2 are kind of obvious. Mine is mine and yours is wicked. Okay, we get that. Mine is yours and yours is pious. It's the martyr, okay, we get it. Mine is yours and yours is mine. That makes absolutely no sense. And so they're calling that person utterly unlearned and naive. But the one that's kind of interesting is that first one. Mine is mine and yours is yours. This is commonplace, and some say Sodom type. So let's unpack, or let's talk about that one for a little bit. What do you think? What do you think it's trying to say? Commonplace and Sodom type.
Well, you have to share to survive. You have to, it's not just me and you. If you don't coexist, there's no exist. Back then, anyway.
Right. If all you do is look out for yourself and just assume that others are looking out for themselves, and just assume that if you just kind of, what is it that those horses have when they put those things on their eyes so they can't see anything but what's right in front of them, then some might say it's commonplace, like, okay, that's just kind of the norm. But others might say, no, it's not the norm. It's really Sodom, like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not that it's wicked. It's more just everyone's just out for themselves, and there's no helping, and there's no community, and there's no sharing.
It's indifference to others.
It's indifference to others. It's not by definition wicked.
Right.
It's just nothing. It's not. It's just.
Selfish.
It's selfish.
It is selfish. Yeah.
It is selfish. It would be. It would if we were certain of an absolute equity of everything at all times, maybe it wouldn't be selfish. It would be, okay, everyone is all the food is out there in the field in that big pile, and everyone is responsible to take their own plates to go out to the field to fill up their plates and bring it back.
There's no sense of community.
Right, that's true. No sense of community, but at least we would just say, okay, look, it's like a person, it's no one is doing you got to do it for me, and I'm just going to sit here and be lazy. Everyone has to take part in doing something for themselves. Now, that said, but we know that that's not how it works. Instead, we know more likely is that sometimes a person has more abundance and sometimes a person has less. And we would like to think that people would be caring about each other and kind of working within the capacity of, sometimes it's mine is mine and yours is yours, and other times mine is yours and yours is yours, and other times I might need help and yours is mine and mine is like it's. And
But also, if you want to bake bread and you have wheat, but he has yeast, well, you can't bake
you gotta
bread.
work
if you
together.
don't- Yeah, you have to.
No one's making bread if I keep all my yeast and you keep all your wheat.
But
And we
that's the
don't
pious,
care.
that's the pious person. Mine is yours and yours is mine.
No.
That's sharing.
No.
That's sharing.
Pious person says mine is yours and yours is yours.
I'm sorry, mine is mine, yours is yours, but
Right.
that's,
And the unlearned is mine is yours and yours is mine.
is that almost too humble? Mine is yours and yours is yours?
Yeah, it's like the martyr, the ascetic. Like what they're missing here is what's ours, what's mine is ours, and what's yours is ours.
That one's saying that I'm not going to eat bread because I don't have yeast, and I'm not going
Right.
to ask you for yeast, so I'm just going to eat matzah.
Right.
Say that it's mine.
Right.
Or what's mine is mine to an extent, and what's yours is yours to an extent. Like that's the why, what's missing from this.
It's the Hillel had the answer.
What, like all the, what's hateful to
No.
yourself, to your
If
neighbor.
I'm only for myself.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That's right.
but the second one is if
I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Yes.
See, I always thought mine is mine and yours is mine is the definition of a marriage. If you're the woman.
Marriage.
All right, Jerry.
Well, no, to some degree Deb, to some degree that's right.
That's right.
And Steve just mentioned it's not 50-50, it's 100-100, but it's
Right.
but at the same time and maybe what they're calling the unlearned person, that's mine is yours and yours is mine, because I'm assuming that mine is still mine, but it's also yours.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that yours is yours, but it's also mine.
That makes
Because
it
when
sound
we read it here, it suggests that you give over all your stuff to me and I give over all my stuff to you. And if that's the case, well, then that's just stupid.
Yeah, what's the point?
Right.
Yeah.
But the second one, mine is yours and yours is mine, really could be, good marriage, yeah.
Would be like, some of mine can be yours and some of yours can be mine.
Yeah, or again, as I was reading it is, of course mine remains mine, but it also is yours. Of course yours remains yours, but it's also mine.
well, it's not complete communism, I guess, is how
Right.
I feel like they're looking at it, where of course what's mine is yours, and that's not the way it works either. Sometimes if you can't spare something,
Right.
it doesn't mean you have to give it to the person, but it means, you got to share it to
And that's
exist. But
why
if I don't have enough yeast, I'm not going to give you yeast.
And that's
that
why
week.
I suggested at the beginning, what's mine is mine up to an extent, and what's yours is yours to an extent. You could argue it that way too.
Is this suggesting that these four types of character are in each person has all four types?
Well, no, that's not what it's suggesting, but I can see why a person could read it that way. Like, I don't disagree with the read. I don't think that's what it's saying. But I hear what you're saying is there are four types of characteristics in a human being, in each of us. And maybe
We have impulses to each.
And maybe, you know what, and I think what it's saying is there's four, because the Hebrew is midot, character types. And I think what it's saying is there are four different type of archetypes, right? But I think that but that doesn't preclude you from being part of all of them. I think that's right. It's a good read.
So we have all four, but it's a different variant.
But at what point, how do we how does it manifested? How do we allow ourselves not to be, to be, not to kind of lean on the mine is mine and yours is mine, right? The evil. It's saying when you go to that place, I actually am kind of now digging your take on it. Like we're all four. And the truth is we are all four.
We did just, in the Torah study, we just read about how we took other people's land.
Well, that's a different story.
That was the
But-
evil. the
But let's
wicked.
take it out of Torah study and let's just think about it from us over the last week, me over the last week. There are plenty of times in which I've been all four of these in my own household, right? How many times have I been like, okay, I'll sit here and you make me dinner. The evil, wicked person. Or you rest, I'll go, I was in DC all day today for a conference. I'm going back to DC right after this class to go pick up my kid. Meanwhile, my wife went to have dinner there, coincidentally. She could have stayed an extra, but she's coming back. She doesn't want to stick around. I'll go back. My point is, so that's me being what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours. So in that, in the same breath, we're doing both. And then what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. I just think that we fall into all these categories. So I actually like what you have to say about it, and I think that's right.
Well, what is mine and yours is mine. It would happen when I split a popsicle of my sister and started eating the half, and she said, "Why are you taking my popsicle?" I said, "I'm not. I'm nationalizing it for the good of the people."
Yeah,
Well, that didn't last too long.
that's right. So, all right, so it's a little bit after 8, so we'll stop here, but we may, so next week, no class, and we'll be in Israel, God willing, probably so.
Have a safe trip.
Thank you. So what does that mean? So it's the 12th? Is that the next time we get together? May 12th, which might be our last
Yeah.
session, actually.
Wow,
Hold on.
what a great class tonight. Ooh.
Yeah, although I still like learning about the sages more, but that's fine.
Yeah, the sages are cool too.
All right, so, the last class for this is on May 12th. So, but we are meeting on the 12th. But the reason why is because the next week, I think, is a board meeting. And also Blue Angels. Anyway, thank you guys. Take care. It's nice to see you.
Now, what about the Monday morning? Is that off also?
It's not happening this Monday, but it's happening